All right, welcome back to Mining Stock Daily. Ian Wagner here on a bloody Thursday, March 26th, with a corporate update from our friends at Precipitate Gold. Precipitate is a gold and copper explorer with operations in the Dominican Republic. They are listed on the TSX Venture under the symbol PRG, with a market cap of roughly $63 million Canadian. And here with us is Jeff Wilson, CEO of Precipitate, to talk about the new drill program at Pueblo Grande. Jeff, good to see you, and welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Ian. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we spoke with you in Toronto during PDAC about a month ago, but there was so much activity around then, and you guys have kind of rejuvenated your story. So I wonder if you might just start with kind of giving everybody the sort of elevator pitch of what Precipitate is, what makes you guys stand out, and kind of, describe your operations a little bit.
Yeah, no problem. We've been focused in the Dominican Republic, as you mentioned, as a jurisdiction that perhaps is not as well known from the mining community as certain other perhaps Latin American countries, but has a great mining history. In fact, one of the largest gold mines in the world is in the Dominican Republic, and that's operated by Barrick, their Pueblo Viejo. So Precipitate has been in the Dominican Republic for about 13 years now. We went in there on the back of a major discovery back in 2012 by a company called GoldQuest. We were quick enough and fortunate enough to acquire the ground immediately adjacent to GoldQuest, where they had made that big discovery. We then sort of expanded our land package to include some ground in and around Barrick's Pueblo Viejo mine as well, and some other projects. So we've put together a portfolio of 3 key projects, all sort of adjacent to known deposits and known mineralization, and relatively early stage projects that are sort of at the drilling discovery type stage now. Because we've been there for quite a few years and sort of have been through the ups and downs of capital markets and commodity pricing markets, we have done a lot of groundwork to advance the projects and the targets to a point where the only thing left to do is drill. And so now, as we enter into, other than some of the recent days here, we enter back into a more bullish gold and precious metals market. We move back into a better sort of equities market for the junior sector. We feel like this is the right time to really, ratchet up the work programs and the drilling, and really get into what this sector is really all about, which is exploration, drilling, and discovery.
Absolutely. On that note, when we saw you in Toronto, you had talked about being patient and kind of waiting for those jurisdictional signals, waiting for the right time to put money in the ground. So that wait is over, right? You put out a release this week that the diamond drilling program has commenced at Pueblo Grande. So congratulations on that. And then walk us through that, what that looks like, what the targets are, what you're looking to find, how long you're looking to get those assays, and just kind of break down that program.
Yeah, no problem. Well, a little bit of background on that is this is a project that we own 100%. It sits right on the claim boundary up against Barrick's Pueblo Viejo mine, which, as I said, is one of the largest mines in the world. We actually had an earn-in agreement with Barrick for 5 years, where Barrick took an earn-in right, and they spent about $7 million US, drilled about 22 holes on the project in a few different areas, but in April of last year gave the project back to us. And, as is often the case, you sort of say, well, if the big guys didn't find anything, maybe there's nothing there. But, as is prudent, you do your due diligence and you go through and you vet through all the data that they provide to you on the back of their work. And we identified something that we thought had been either underappreciated or overlooked by Barrick. And we sort of vectored in on that as maybe a remaining or outstanding opportunity to be tested. So before we got too carried away on that, we ran our own geophysical survey over what we thought was a chargeability anomaly, sort of immediately adjacent to Barrick's mining pits. And sure enough, our own geophysical survey over that target area sort of lit up these high chargeability anomalies, which is sort of what you want to see in sort of a high sulfidation or intermediate sulfidation type scenario. So that gave us confidence that there was something there. The second aspect of that was that it had never been, this new anomaly that we identified, it never had a drill hole through it. So it was untested, it was large, and sort of screaming to be drilled. So As you mentioned, this week we announced the commencement of drilling there. This is a fairly straightforward target. We can see this chargeability anomaly sitting from about 100 meters below surface down to about 350. And we're going to start by drilling about 2,000 meters of drilling, which will be about, let's call it 4 holes of about 450 to 500 meters per hole. So relatively shallow, just trying to test through that 100 meters to 300 meters where we see the chargeability, get through sort of the guts of that high chargeability anomaly, and see whether or not this chargeable anomaly is in fact gold bearing. And so, as I said, we've just started that this week. We expect the program to run for about 2.5 months. Assays will be reported as they're received. So it's a fairly exciting opportunity in the shadow of a world-class mining operation, testing a fairly sizable, strong target that's never been drilled.
Yeah, you mentioned, I think before, that's what, roughly 800 meters by 400 meters, and fairly shallow. And I know you mentioned these you're going to be going down only about, starting around that 100 meters to 300 meters. That IP picture is a little bit more layered, right, than just kind of a simple anomaly. You've got shallow alteration blankets sitting above some stronger internal lobes and possibly feeder structures below that. Just for all the investors who are not geologists, kind of like, what does that architecture, suggest to you about what might be sitting down there, and then sort of maybe put that in the context of what geology is and mineralization is in the DR that maybe people might be familiar with in other parts of the world.
Yeah, I mean this is sort of a bit of a classic sort of lithocap environment whereby not too far below surface, and maybe it's in that 100-meter range below surface. You see this lithocap structure, or this which is essentially like a very hard, tough, almost impermeable type cap. And so when the geological events happen and the fluids start to flow up to surface, they hit the bottom of that, that hard rock that cannot be permeated, and oftentimes those fluids will sort of settle underneath that lithocap. So that's sort of the target that we're sort of seeing here, is that it seems as if this chargeability anomaly, if it is in fact gold-bearing sulfide mineralization there, would be what you would expect from a geological event that would have sort of created these fluids that would have sat underneath this cap. And so if we can drill underneath that cap down to about, like I say, 350 to 450 meters, and see this chargeability is in fact gold bearing. And as you mentioned, it's not just one sort of contiguous blob, it's a number of different individual sort of almost clusters of anomalies, some of which look, again, on first pass to be the potential to be feeders. Again, whether or not that proves to be the case, we'll see how the initial drilling goes. And if the initial drilling goes well and we get a bit of a proof of concept here that where we see the chargeability, we in fact see gold, then there's a significant amount of additional drilling that we could do, because there are a number of these clusters, a number of these blobs, if you will, that need to be tested. And so if we can find gold in the first 3 or 4, then I think we're going to have an opportunity to expand that drill program, add additional meters, additional holes, and see if we can find the full extent of that mineralization.
You've been clear, or you've been saying that this, because this is kind of a newer, these new chargeability zones that you guys identified just within the last year, that this is somewhat binary, right? And does those 4 holes, the 2,000 meters, does that give you sort of enough data to sort of be able to go in there and make that decision, or is it kind of just you'll wait and you'll see what hole 1 comes back and then kind of go from there? Or how walk us through that decision making process?
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, I've mentioned in other conversations that I've had with people that we see it as being fairly binary. I mean, I look at it practically in the sense that, look, this is a project that has been drilled by other operators prior to our acquisition of the ground. It had a 5-year earn-in agreement with Barrick, where Barrick spent $7 million in exploration looking for mineralization, and didn't see sufficient for them, and so they gave it back. So, my view is, there's only so many more opportunities within this project to identify, a meaningful mineral deposit. We see this anomaly as one of them. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't want to, to try to make a story out of something that's not there. So if these holes that we drill in this program don't deliver that sort of proof of concept, then I wouldn't say that the project is necessarily entirely dead, but that certainly would shift our focus maybe back to some of our other assets. So we will find out. We think, and I've instructed my team, my geological team, like, look, let's not walk until we're confident that there's nothing there. So if it's four holes, it's four holes. If it's five, if it's six, if it's two, whatever point my technical team says, look, this, we're not seeing what we were hoping to see here, then we'll pack up the drills and move on.
Let's shift then to some of your other projects. Juan de Herrera obviously is maybe one that if listeners are familiar with your story that they're very aware of. And I think when we talked last, you laid out a drill program for over there as well, while wanting to maintain kind of patient capital and not try and get too scattered. But what is kind of happening over there, and how do you prioritize Ginger Ridge as the year goes along, I guess?
Yeah, yeah. So that certainly is, has kind of been for a long time our flagship project. It really is the project that we have, I think, the most targets, perhaps the most mature and advanced targets. We've done a lot of work there over the course of 12, 13 years. And so, as the drilling is ongoing at Pueblo Grande, there is a lot of preparatory work happening at the same time at Juan de Herrera with respect to improving access routes, permitting, finalizing permitting applications, hiring some local staff for just kind of labor purposes, and getting the camp established and those kinds of things. So there's work going on there now. It's mostly, like I said, preparatory type work. But the view there is that over the course of the last, well, for a number of years, but certainly in the last 18 to 24 months, we've really refined, I would call it three or four sort of priority zones within the project where we've done extensive geochemical work or sampling work at surface. We've seen, nice, large gold and copper anomalies at surface. And we've run IP or induced polarization geophysical surveys over those geochem anomalies, and we're seeing the right kinds of geophysical signatures underneath them. It's a similar sort of story as what we just talked about at Pueblo Grande. Finding those chargeability anomalies underneath gold and copper at surface has sort of been the vectoring tool for this region as it relates to other discoveries and other deposits that have been delineated in the district. So we sort of know the makeup, if you will, or the recipe for where gold and copper lives in this district, and often it is that combination of geochemistry at surface, geophysics below. So now that we've delineated, let's call it four for the time being, four sort of strong, mature, advanced targets that are drill worthy, drill ready. The view is that as we are finalizing our drill program at Pueblo Grande, we're advancing those targets at Juan de Herrera to get ready for drilling. So as I mentioned, we're doing some preparatory work. And the view will be that we'll come in, and I think Ginger Ridge is likely to be the first target that we test for a couple of different reasons. One, it's probably the most advanced target. It's the area where we've done the most work. Secondly, it's adjacent to, on the other side of the claim boundary, a pretty significant new discovery on Gold Quest's ground called Cachimbo. And Cachimbo has seen now a couple of rounds of drilling that have been quite encouraging and positive. There's definitely some significant mineralization there, and Gold Quest work is ongoing. And again, our Ginger Ridge is sort of on trend, right on the other side of the claim boundary, and there may be some continuity there between our Ginger Ridge and Cachimbo. So that is likely to be where we start. From there it becomes a matter of success contingent. I mean, if the drilling goes well at Ginger Ridge, we'll stick around. There we can increase the size and scale of that program and continue to drill there. As an alternative, as I said, we've got other targets within the project that we can sequentially move the drills from one to the next to the next to the next. So based on all of that, my view is that we've certainly got the finances and the budget to do a fairly sizable program here to test multiple zones with a significant amount of meters. And so, I think that through the course of 2026, we're earmarking somewhere in the ballpark of about 10,000 meters of drilling. to test, several of those targets. If we latch onto something, we'll stick with it and we'll continue to hammer it. If it's deemed best to move over to something new, then we've got the capacity to do that. So again, we're in the process, sort of, looking to do the sequential work to make sure each of those targets is prepared for drilling, so that we can in fact move the drill from one target area to another, so that the prep work is done, the permits are in hand, the local people understand what we're doing, and so that we don't have any, to the extent that we can avoid them, we don't have any impediments to continuing on that program.
Is that Juan de Herrera? Would that be the more VMS style deposit versus, say, what you have at Pueblo Grande?
It is. It's a region or a belt that definitely is a VMS. That's the model, I guess, that sort of we're all sort of looking for in that area. But as is often the case, Mother Nature's not always as straightforward as you might hope or think, and so I think we're quite open in our ongoing exploration work to the possibility of identifying epithermal mineralization, perhaps some porphyry mineralization. So we're sort of letting the rock speak to us a little bit here as we advance, because these targets within our project are projects that have never been drilled by anybody else. We're sort of the first group to do any meaningful systematic exploration, including sampling. I mean, this property package wasn't even sampled historically. So we're early days here, if you will. I mean, in terms of, this is not a project that's been worked and drilled and has sort of some understanding of what might be there. So yeah, VMS is definitely kind of the primary target model, but the possibility for other mineralization styles is certainly there.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I ask is we talk about gold a lot, but VMS, I think of copper, and right, you may come back with not gold, but you may come back with copper on that, right? And I can't say I know exactly what Gold Quest's recent drill results have shown, but are they seeing that mix of gold and copper as well, or
They
how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, they absolutely are, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that what we see actually is often there is copper with the gold, which again, from a mining production standpoint, is a wonderful cost savings. I mean, people use that classic sort of promotional tool where basically the copper pays for the gold, and you're sort of mining gold for free, sort of thing. We certainly see within our property package. I don't know if the right word is kind of zonation, but basically areas like Ginger Ridge appear to be more gold rich, more precious metals rich, gold and silver. We have other areas within the property that are a little bit more base metal rich, and we've seen some really, really elevated or high grade copper results from some of the parts of our project a little further south. A zone we call the southeast zone, for example, we reported a 13.5% rock sample, 13.5% copper rock sample, and we've done some trenching in that area to try to validate that single sample with something a little bit more expanded and consistent. We've had some really nice trench results, again, copper values in the several percent copper over 5-6 meters and beyond. So yes, there's definitely a copper component to this property package, and there's definitely a copper component to this belt, and that includes Gold Quest and a company a little further up to the north called Unigold, where again all of us are seeing significant copper values going along with some quite high grade gold values that are being reported.
You have another project that I don't think we've touched on, and I might butcher the name. Ponton.
Ponton, we call it
Yeah.
Ponton. Yeah.
You want to tell us a little bit about that, and just kind of, I know you, and then also how you're stacking resources, right? I know you've talked about the 10,000 meters for the year, and obviously you've got priorities for at Pueblo Grande. But where does Ponton fit into the Precipitate story?
Yeah, Ponton was a project that we drilled, I want to say in 2021, something like that. Again, we acquired the property at the same time we picked up Pueblo Grande. We picked up sort of a suite of assets from an outgoing company. And so we acquired their land package, their portfolio that included those two projects. We went in, we did some geochemistry, some sampling. We got some good values. We did some, again, geophysics. We saw some chargeability anomalies underneath the geochemical surface. And we went in and we drilled that in 2021. We were going to do, I think, a 5 or 6 hole program. We got a hole and a half into that program, and then we ran into some community issues. Some of the local people, decided that they didn't necessarily want mining in their backyard at that point in time. There was a lot of sort of noise happening in the country about Barrick's tailings expansion, and there was kind of some people that were, I think, misinformed or maybe a little undereducated in terms of what Barrick was actually going to do, and that just sort of permeated out throughout sort of the mining sector at large at that point, and there was kind of an anti-mining kind of sentiment, and that speaks to part of the reason why we spent the last 4 or 5 years being relatively passive with our work, because we were just not seeing the right kind of environment jurisdictionally. But so at Ponton, we got a couple holes in. We didn't really see anything in those first 1.5 holes. We got a lot of really good support from the government to try to keep working. They were talking about how can we support you, how can we get the locals on side. It became just a little bit too much of a conflict that we decided, look, best to just kind of pull out. And we've got other places to do work. Pueblo Grande, Juan de Herrera will come back another time. So it's sitting there. The best targets on that property in our mind have still not been drilled. The environment and the sentiment in the DR, as we've talked about, has improved over the last 18-24 months. And so Ponton is again becoming more of a part of the conversation. But to your point about resources, yes, we have money where we could be drilling on 3 different fronts kind of at the same time. But in terms of, manpower, and more specifically kind of my head geological team here in Canada, I don't think we want to spread them too thin, and things can kind of fall through the cracks if you've sort of got your B team instead of your A team overseeing work programs. And so Ponton, again, is back into the conversation. We have been doing some surveying, if you will, of the local community in recent months to try to get a sense of what it might look like for us to go back in there. And yeah, we'll sort of, that's the work in progress, if you will, but certainly still a definitely a viable exploration target that we'd like to drill.
Sure. Okay. Thanks for that color there. Lastly, kind of, I guess 2 questions. I mean, when we talk a year from now, maybe at VRIC or PDAC, kind of what will have a successful year looked like for Precipitate?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of open to a few different possibilities there, I suppose. I mean, look, at the end of the day, we are a junior exploration company focused on discovery. Discoveries don't happen without drills turning. So this year is kind of a pivotal year for us in the sense that we'll be drilling on at least 2 different projects and drilling multiple targets. So, if a year from now we've had some success with this drilling on both projects, on both fronts, I mean, I think we'll be away to the races. And if on the back of a discovery, the next challenge becomes, can you duplicate that discovery? You pull a great hole. We've seen it many times before where you go back and try to find continuity and scale and size on the back of that hole, and it just isn't there. So it's kind of twofold. It's number one, make a discovery. And I think the market and our shareholder base will respond favorably to that, of course. Then can you follow that up with tracing that mineralization over a meaningful width and length? Can you find an ore body that's economically mineable? And so my view would be, let's make a discovery. And again, that doesn't happen overnight. And again, exploration can break your heart. So I think we all understand the odds here. But I liken it to winning the lottery. I mean, the more tickets you have, the better chance you have of winning. And I think we've positioned ourselves here with a suite of target areas that all justify a drill testing program. And my hope is that one or more of those tickets we can cash in with a discovery and line up something that looks like it could be a meaningful deposit. Where we go from there, I think is time will tell, and results will sort of dictate. And I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. I will say that the one other sort of possibility here, as it relates to I guess success for Precipitate, is along with our own work to try to find our own meaningful deposits within our projects. We do have sort of a bit of a secondary possibility, which is the potential consolidation, if you will, of the property packages between GoldQuest and Precipitate, in the sense that there seems to be a lot of showings, target areas, a lot of smoke, if you will, that seems to be the possibility for these things to extend from one side of the claim boundary to the other, I think is strong. And so, as GoldQuest advances its multi-million ounce deposit to a feasibility study, which they're currently doing, and simultaneously test new targets within their project, which they are also doing. The opportunity for some mid-tier or major company to sort of see the bigger picture here between Gold Quest and Precipitate as perhaps a big consolidated land package where maybe instead of a 3 or 4 million ounce deposit, the potential to find 5, 6, 7 million ounces starts to look possible. And I think that's where Precipitate again would be part of that conversation.
Yeah. So does your geographically sort of you run from Gold Quest border to Barrick's border? Then are you guys kind of sandwiched in the middle there, or is it enough scattered around that it's you've got two borders, but they're not contiguous in there?
Yeah, no, actually, as it relates to Gold Quest, our property adjacent to Gold Quest is sort of independent from anything to do with Barrick. So that's kind of a standalone belt, if you will, where Gold Quest and Precipitate hold all or most of the prospective terrain within that district. The Pueblo Grande project's, a couple of hours away over in another part of the country, which that ground is next to Barrick. Again, in terms of just sort of a potential consolidation or roll up, I mean, again, if we find something fairly interesting immediately next to Barrick, one of the largest mines in the world, and they think that even a small deposit, if it's high enough grade, would make sense to kind of increase their throughput and their grade, their head grade. There may be an opportunity again there to do something with them. And of course, we have had a prior relationship with Barrick over the last 5 years. So, the lines of communication there are quite strong and quite open. So, who knows?
Okay. Well, great. Well, we'll leave it there for now. And listen, Jeff, I appreciate the time. We definitely want to catch back up when the drill results come back, because as you mentioned, success comes from drilling. We want to kind of see how things move along. But you got a lot of exciting irons in the fire, so to speak.
Yeah, it's going to be I think it's going to be a very exciting and sort of news heavy, certainly in the next 6 months or so, and hopefully beyond. And so, it's this is where the rubber hits the road in the junior exploration business, and we'll just plow ahead here and hope that the assay labs are favorable for us.
Yeah, and timely, right? That's
Exactly.
the thing when everyone's drilling right now. Well, listen, appreciate the time, Jeff. We will catch up with you again here in the coming weeks and months. And thanks so much for coming back on the podcast.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. That is Precipitate Gold. Jeff Wilson, CEO of Precipitate Gold. They are listed on the TSX Venture at PRG. The information presented should not be considered investment advice. Mining Stock Daily and its affiliates are not responsible for any loss arising from any investment decision in connection with the material presented herein. Please do your own research or speak with a licensed financial representative before making any investment decisions.